Everybody, welcome back to Terrace Talk. Well, we're not used to this, are we? Midweek fixtures in the Premier League, but we have reached that special round of games, and Norwich City have, I think it is probably their longest away trip of the season, up to St James's Park on Tuesday night to face Newcastle United in what is a really big game in the Premier League, at the bottom end of the Premier League, of course, 19th against 20th as it stands going into this game. And well, we couldn't let it pass without doing a mini Terrace Talk. It's not a full-blown episode, but this is a nice, short and snappy version for your ears, maybe if you're travelling up to Newcastle. Delighted to be joined by Andrew Musgrove, who is social media editor for the North East and Yorkshire for Reach Sport. Andrew, how are you doing? Thank you very much for joining us. As I said to you off air, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to cram everything into the time that we have available for this when it comes to Newcastle United, but it's been probably a few weeks of change. Does it feel like things are beginning to settle down both on off the pitch and on the pitch?
Not really. I think given who's taken over the club and what it means in terms of the potential spending power, I don't think it's ever going to quiet down, not for a long time, because you can't come into the Premier League with this sort of money and expect it to quiet down. So I think we've got a long period of time where Newcastle is going to be at the forefront of pretty much everyone's talking point in the debates.
Is it a bit of a strange situation to be in, because you say there's so many rumours already about how much money there is available, January window as well, and I suppose that's probably a big thing in people's minds at the moment. I mean, we've got 5 games before we reach that point, 5-6 games before we reach that point. So I suppose it's almost this bizarre kind of, not holding pattern, but it kind of feels like everyone's waiting for Newcastle's new era to really get underway when we see new players coming in. Is that kind of how it feels in the North East?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had a funny few weeks, really, because we had the takeover, which was so prolonged, it was quite unbelievable. So that finally went through. And then you had the first game where Steve Bruce was still in charge, despite the fact it was pretty well known he was going to be shown the door at some point. And then you had Eddie Howe arrive, and then his first game he caught COVID, so he couldn't be on the touchline. So we've had this very disjointed start to this new era. And it would have been very interesting to see if everything had happened in sync, the difference. I don't think Newcastle would have still be in this position of no wins this season, but that's life, that's football. It is typical Newcastle, I think fans would say, for everything to go wrong when it should be going right. In terms of January, I think there's been lots of ridiculous rumours put around by people from all over Europe, and the likes of Mbappe being linked. It's just ridiculous. Newcastle United fans have never sensibly once linked stars like that. Even more so given the position Newcastle United are in, because you need a different sort of player to get out of the relegation zone to what you do if you're going to build a top 10 side. And we've also seen Eddie Howe in recent days and interviews kind of just play down January. The focus is, understandably, on getting out of the relegation zone, and he's really just trying to focus on that. He said today he had half an eye on January, and that's, totally acceptable. He'll be planning. But I don't think it's by any means the focus, and I don't think it's by any means the focus of the fans either. They, first and foremost, just want to see a win.
Well, that's the big thing. Is I was going to ask you, what, just about a third of the way through the season, still no win on the board for Newcastle United. Despite it, maybe there's a bit of a conflict. I don't know. You'll be able to tell us between perhaps the mood at the club off the pitch. Now Mike Ashley is gone, and Alan Shearer recently said it was an era of no hope and despair, pretty much, which I think probably sums it up quite nicely. But is there almost a conflict at the moment between the mood at how the club is now viewed off the pitch compared to how it's performing on the pitch? Is that kind of a fair assessment of things?
Definitely. I think you'd struggle to find a club that was bottom of the Premier League or bottom of any league without a win so far into the season, and to have just this optimism around the place, because essentially it has been 14 years of, like, Alan Shearer said, no hope, there was no plan or progression. And I think at any other club, if there hadn't been, if they were bottom of the league without a win, it would be gloom and doom. And Newcastle United fans are well aware of the position they're in. Eddie Howe is well aware of the position they're in. He knows it's not going to be easy. If you watched the Arsenal game, the defending was absolutely shocking. It's been shocking all season. But there's still this kind of wave of optimism still running through the club, which is brilliant to see. And that's solely because of the takeover, I think, but a little bit as well because people are generally happy to see a coach like Eddie Howe, who's progressive. He's got plans. He's tactically aware. He likes to play a bit more on the front foot. He likes to be organised. I think despite the fact, they drew against Brentford, they lost against Arsenal. You can kind of see little bits of Eddie Howe's plan and project coming into place. And in time, I fully believe he will turn things around. Obviously, time is kind of against Newcastle, especially if they do lose against Norwich. Hopefully they won't from our point of view, but it's a massive week for Newcastle. And yet, like I say, it's still, the fans are really just still in a really good mood about everything off the pitch. And I think that is a really, will be a really big boost going into what is a massive week for Newcastle against Norwich and then Burnley on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to pick up on just that point. The fact it's 2 home games against Norwich and Burnley, the other sides that occupy the bottom 3. This could really change the course of Newcastle's season, couldn't it? In terms of a momentum perspective, if you could pick up 2 wins against those teams, suddenly everyone views Newcastle, I suppose, as they have done in Norwich in the last couple of weeks, in a completely different way.
Yeah, I mean, momentum is the key, isn't it? It's so important because you get 1 win, and then the good results can just roll on from there. I think everyone was hoping maybe for a bit of a bounce. And I think, again, it goes back to, had Eddie Howe been on the touchline against Brentford, I think Newcastle probably would have won that game. Obviously, nothing's certain, but I think we would have seen the fans go to another level. I was in the ground as a fan, and it was amazing as it was. But if you just imagine Eddie Howe actually being on the touchline for his first game against the side Newcastle really ought to have beaten, they were on a terrible run of form, Brentford, as it were, things conspired against Newcastle, and Eddie Howe couldn't be there. But yeah, it's a massive week, and momentum, like you mentioned there, it really is important that Newcastle get a win against Norwich and then get a win against Burnley. I mean, these are 2 must-win games because Newcastle, are already, 6 points, I think, off safety. If Norwich win on Tuesday, then Newcastle are not only cut adrift from 17th, they're cut adrift from the 1 team above them. So from a Newcastle point of view, this really has to be 6 points this week.
I was staggered looking at kind of the statistics and various things, the league table more than anything. And you look at the goals conceded column for Newcastle United, 29. And I'm sure most Norwich fans, having watched them this season and certainly before Dean Smith's arrival, how easily they ship goals, and they've conceded 27. So Newcastle have conceded 2 more than Norwich at this stage of the season. That's probably quite surprising for Norwich fans. And we all know Newcastle fans would prefer to see an attacking style of play. Certainly not what they've seen under Steve Bruce and even Graham Jones in his caretaker reign. But I suppose that's probably the area that Eddie Howe will be looking at and really attempting to tighten up heading into, as you described, a massive week for the club.
Oh yeah, unquestionably. And Saturday against Arsenal really frustrated me, just the way they were defending. I think it's widely accepted that they don't have the personnel to have a really good defence. I mean, the last central defender to come in was Fabian Schär back in August 2018. A lot of that defence played under Rafa Benitez in the Championship. So in many ways, we're seeing the direct impact of a lack of investment under Mike Ashley, where he thought it was all right just to get by. And it's now coming home to roost, really, because having defenders that you had 4 years ago playing the Premier League, no disrespect to them, it's going to backfire at some point, and we're seeing that now. And there's just a lack of organisation. There's a lack of communication. And Saturday really, I already felt it was bad. My personal opinion was that the defence was particularly bad, and it was always going to be Newcastle's weak link. It was always going to be difficult for Eddie Howe to turn it around because he's not that well known as a defensive coach, which is fine. And you can only work with what you've got. But against Arsenal, it was just absolutely shocking. There were warning signs in the first half where Arsenal players were just allowed to stroll past defenders. There was no one passing the man on. There was no one communicating. There was the chance that Aubameyang had, which I'm sure your listeners and viewers have all seen a match of the day where he missed from 3 yards out. But for me, the more worrying aspect of that was how, if you pause it just as he actually hits the post, you can see Odegaard and Smith Rowe unmarked in the box. And I think it's Smith Rowe with a header that forces Dubravka into the save, and it finally drops to Aubameyang. But if Smith Rowe misses that header for whatever reason or just ducks out the way, the closest man to him is his own teammate, Odegaard. And it's just this is meant to be a Premier League defence, and it's just shocking. And then the 2 goals Arsenal scored was again just a case of the defenders letting the men run and just not being able to catch up with them, but not even that, just switching off at the crucial stage and Arsenal punishing them. And I tweeted out saying, good team. I tweeted out at half time before Arsenal scored the 2 goals. good teams will punish you. And someone tweeted back saying bad teams will punish you. And, I fully expect if, Teemu Pukki gets a chance, Newcastle switch off again, he probably will punish Newcastle. And it does give hope to your listeners and your viewers that Norwich can score a couple of goals on Tuesday night.
Is it an added bonus that Newcastle are going to be without Jamal Lascelles and Matt Ritchie? I know you kind of speak about their defence in not so glowing terms, so maybe it's a bonus to Newcastle. I don't know. You'll be able to tell us. But should Norwich fans view that as a positive, the fact those two players aren't going to be in the starting lineup tomorrow evening?
I've seen a lot of fans say it is a positive, whether they're joking or not, only they can tell me. Look, I think it's a difficult situation regardless of who's playing, because I think the level is just not up to scratch. And Jamal Lascelles, I think he's a good captain, but I do think he just switches off too often. And we saw against Arsenal, he really didn't have a good game. I thought he really struggled. But then equally against Brentford, he had a torrid first half, but I thought he actually really improved in the second half. And I know it sounds daft considering Newcastle conceded 3 goals, but there is a decent enough defender in there. And he's missing it. Who comes in? Is it a 32-year-old Federico Fernandez? Is it centre midfielder Isaac Hayden? Like, the options that Eddie Howe's got are not promising, and he's only got the personnel that he can work with until January, and it's a real worry because the options aren't that good, and the fixture list going into December and into the new year is horrendous for Newcastle. And I'm not someone who kind of looks at the fixtures and say, it's and a lot of people kind of say, I can't believe the run in. You've got to play everyone at some point. But, when you do look at Newcastle's December fixtures, goodness me, that defence is going to have to tighten up and quickly. But I just can't see how they're going to manage to do it.
Yeah, we'll come on to the game specifically in just a moment. One question I want to ask, really from my own perspective, is what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Because there's a fair few Norwich fans that are travelling up. We've obviously seen the Burnley game. I know it's different ends of the country, but the Burnley game got called off. There's been lots of snow up north. We haven't really had too much of that down here, to be honest. But should we be wrapping up warm? I suppose there's no doubt of the game being called off or anything like that, is there?
No, I think the worst of it passed on Sunday. I mean, what it'll be like down at pitch side compared to up in the heavens and the gods is something only Norwich fans will be able to tell me afterwards. I think it'll just be a bit nippy, so you'll just have to make sure you got your thermals on and your gloves. But yeah, I think it'll be a crisp night to say the least. So I'm sure none of the players will want a football in the face, because that will sting.
Yeah, it will. The old 1 to the 5, they're the painful ones, aren't they? Where they do really sting. You've kind of sort of talked about this game from a Newcastle perspective. To kind of zoom out and look at it, because most people will be describing this as a relegation 6-pointer, probably fairly so given the table. Norwich 3 points ahead of Newcastle. So would you say there's more pressure on Newcastle heading into this game? The fact they haven't won a game, Eddie Howe, as you said, in the technical area for the first time against a team who is directly above them, 3 points above them, they can close that gap to Norwich at least. Do you feel there is more pressure on Newcastle than Norwich heading into this one?
Yeah, certainly. And I think there's a lot of people wanting Newcastle United to fail, so I think that adds another bit of pressure onto Newcastle. And I think that, without being disrespectful to Norwich, I think a lot of people would expect Norwich to maybe go down and struggle and what have you. And I do like the fact Dean Smith's come in and he said, look, we're not just going to survive. We want to push on up the table and be an established Premier League side, which I think is great, because that's what every Premier League club should aspire to be, not just, making up the numbers. But I think there's just so much pressure on Newcastle. Like you said, they haven't got the win, and I think there's pressure from all angles. The fans are really looking at this game as a must-win. If you lose to Norwich, and again, no disrespect, who are you possibly going to beat? You couldn't beat Brentford. Are you going to beat Burnley? You've been dumped out the cup by Burnley already once this season against essentially their reserves. It's such a crucial week for Newcastle, and none of this is Eddie Howe's fault. I mentioned earlier how it's kind of the impact. Well, it is the impact of Mike Ashley's underinvestment. It's the impact of how Steve Bruce handled and set up the side in the previous 2 years. Eddie Howe's coming in, he's fighting so many fires that it's always going to be difficult to hit the ground running. I know Dean Smith has come in and he has hit the ground running, but I don't know, maybe you can tell me that the club looked relatively organised. You got good owners. You seem to have a bit of a plan, and obviously he came in the back of a win as well, which would always help. Whereas Newcastle, there's so many elements which need to be fixed and corrected that it's not just on the pitch. And then you have the fact that Eddie Howe did miss a game because of COVID, so he's not had all the time he would have wanted, so that knocks you back a couple of weeks. There's so many elements going around which make his life hard at Newcastle. But of course, the most important thing is just getting that result tomorrow and setting yourself up for that game against Burnley.
Yeah, I think the big difference that Dean Smith has made is actually Norwich's work off the ball. They press a lot higher. They want to engage with teams a lot higher, win the ball back up the pitch a lot higher. There was a moment in the second half against Wolves where they had a throw-in in kind of the right back position, and every single one, with the exception of Tim Krul, was in the opposition half. So that's been probably the major change, but they have looked a bit more defensively structured as well. Final question before I ask you kind of how you see this game going. Quite a few kind of connections between the two clubs, I think that's fair to say. So a two-part question. First and foremost, Tim Krul coming back to St James's Park. He obviously has done before, but Norwich fans obviously know he's well loved up there, but sort of give us an idea of how well loved he is and how well received he'll be. And secondly, just a little bit of an update on how Jamal Lewis and Jacob Murphy are doing. They're obviously two players that came through the Norwich Academy, and I think Norwich fans always like to watch their academy graduates with particular interest. So give us a little bit of insight into those as well.
I mean, Tim Krul, like you say, he's well loved up here. I think, I'm not mistaken, I think his better half is a Geordie as well, and he's been spotted a few times up here. But I think when he's had a break and stuff, he'll get a really good reception. Newcastle have always been quite fortunate to have good goalkeepers: Shea Gibbons, Steve Harper. And Tim Krul's up there with them because he was a fantastic goalkeeper for Newcastle. Now, a lot of people didn't really want to see him leave. He had a couple of injuries, and I think maybe certain people thought his time was up as a Premier League goalkeeper. But he's fought back, and he's doing very well at Norwich. So yeah, he'll get a really good applause. As for Jamal Lewis and Jacob Murphy, they've had very different times on Tyneside. I mean, it looked at one point Jacob Murphy's career was over and done and dusted, but he came back. He fought well after being out on loan. And he's come in. When he came in last season, he really took the chance, and he ended up becoming a first-team regular under Bruce. And again, I would say probably is the first choice at right wing back, simply because going forward, he's one of the best crossers of the ball defensively. He's vulnerable, and you can see teams like to attack down that side. I mean, down both sides essentially, because both Matt Ritchie and Jacob Murphy, they'll be the first to admit they're not defenders, and when the ball does go over the top, they're easily caught out. Jacob Murphy, though, has improved drastically when it comes to defending, and his work rate is unbelievable. And it'd be interesting to see if he plays tomorrow. There's a good chance he will, I think, simply just because they'll want to attack more defensively, or I'd like to see them maybe start Manquillo just to give them that bit of balance. I think Lewis will start on the left because Matt Ritchie is suspended, and he's just been really unfortunate. He came with big hopes. I think everyone was really happy they signed him. Obviously Liverpool were linked and Newcastle beat them to the signature, and I think everyone was expecting really big things, especially after his debut season, but it just hasn't happened for whatever reason. I don't know whether it's the situation. Newcastle, was fighting against relegation, perhaps hasn't helped. I think he just needs the arm around his shoulder, give him a bit of encouragement. Obviously he's been playing for Northern Ireland, doing all right. Big game from tomorrow if he does start against his former club, and he has a chance to keep Matt Ritchie out of the side as well with a good performance. So fingers crossed, because a lot of people are willing him on. They know he's a young lad. They know he's got time to improve. A lot of money was spent on him, and you just hope he can prove why he deserves to be in that first team.
Go on then. Finally, Andrew, look, people on Terrace Talk tend to go for a head and heart prediction, so feel free to do that. But how do you see this one going tomorrow? And then let's have your score prediction as well.
It's a really difficult one because there's so much pressure on Newcastle. But I think because it'll be Eddie Howe's first game in person at St James's Park, everyone likes a little game under the lights as well. And there's going to be another flag display. I really do think the atmosphere, and it's cliche, but I think the atmosphere, the 12th man, will get Newcastle over the line. I know Norwich have had a decent start under Dean Smith, but I think Newcastle just need a win, and it needs to come tomorrow. Like, there's no ifs or buts. It has to come tomorrow. I think they'll get it. I do think they'll get it. I think it'll potentially be a high-scoring game as well, because both sides have conceded far too many goals this season. We saw against Brentford, who, a bit like Norwich and Newcastle, can't defend to save their lives. I mean, both defences, you could have gotten 3 or 4 double-decker buses through and still had room for private jets. So I think we might see a few goals tomorrow, and I'm gonna go maybe 3-2 win for Newcastle.
Oh, interesting. I see. I can see it. Bottom two teams, bottom end of the table, it being really tight. But like you say, maybe the fact that neither have really been able to defend over the course of the season, maybe that will come into play. I'm not sure. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. A relatively short notice as well. Thank you all very much for watching. We'll be back with a full scale Terrace talk this weekend for Norwich City's visit to Tottenham. But first, the small matter of a trip to St James's Park for a very, very big game. We'll be there. PinkUn.com, the place to be. And we'll see you again very, very soon.